Proctor Yinth had never questioned the efficiency of telepathic evaluation until he found himself staring at the preliminary files for species 848. The datapad in his four-fingered hands displayed basic information about the inhabitants of the third planet in what the locals called the Sol system, bipedal mammals, recent space travel capability, standard carbon-based biology. Everything appeared routine. The evaluation chamber hummed with familiar energy as Yinth performed his pre-assessment checks. After 2 centuries of conducting these tests, the process had become as natural as breathing. He could scan a mind, categorize its cognitive patterns, and file the appropriate recommendation within standard galactic hours. The Mindari had perfected the system long before most species had developed written language. His pale blue skin rippled slightly as he adjusted the telepathic amplifiers mounted around his elongated head. The devices would boost his natural abilities and record everything for the Council archives. Yinth took pride in his perfect evaluation record. In 847 previous assessments, he had never encountered a species that challenged the established protocols. The humans would be different, though he did not yet know how. 12 subjects waited in containment fields aboard the orbital testing facility. The selection process had taken months as various human governments debated who should represent their species. Eventually, they settled on what they called a diverse sample, individuals from different backgrounds, ages, and specializations. Yinth found their selection criteria amusing. Most species simply sent their most intelligent members. Subject files scrolled across his screen. Dr. Amy Wells, physicist. Riverstone poet. Bob Turner, farmer. Luna Rodriguez, video game designer. Dorothy Kim, grandmother. Pierre Dubois, chef. Sam Johnson, mechanic. Rachel Green, teacher. Kai Tanaka, musician. Tyler Brooks, programmer. Maria Santos, nurse. Alex Chen, comedian. The variety puzzled Yinth. Why include a farmer when they had scientists? Why send someone whose job involved growing food alongside someone who studied the fundamental forces of reality? Most species understood that intelligence existed in hierarchies. The smartest individuals represented the species' potential. These humans seemed to have chosen randomly. He activated the first containment field and observed Dr. Wells through the transparent barrier. She sat calmly, occasionally glancing around the chamber with what appeared to be scientific curiosity rather than fear. Her file indicated expertise in theoretical physics, specifically quantum mechanics and unified field theory. This made sense as a representative choice. The preliminary biological scans confirmed standard mammalian brain structure, electrical activity within normal parameters for a carbon-based consciousness. Nothing suggested the complexity that awaited him. Yinth positioned himself at the primary telepathic interface and began the standard opening protocol. A gentle mental probe, designed to establish basic contact without alarming the subject. He had performed this exact procedure thousands of times. The initial touch should reveal surface thoughts, emotional state, and cognitive baseline measurements. The moment his consciousness brushed against Dr. Wells's mind, something felt different. Instead of the orderly thought patterns he expected, Yinth encountered what could only be described as organized chaos. Multiple streams of consciousness flowed simultaneously through her brain. She was thinking about the test, certainly, but also about something called a cat, a melody that seemed stuck in her head, concerns about research funding, and an inexplicable desire for something called pizza. Yinth pulled back slightly, checking his equipment. Everything functioned normally. He tried again, going deeper this time. Dr. Wells was simultaneously calculating the energy requirements for faster-than-light travel, wondering if she had remembered to set her home security system, analyzing the mathematical principles behind the containment field, and composing a mental grocery list. 4 distinct thought processes operated in parallel, each as complex as the primary consciousness of most species he had evaluated. The physicist noticed his mental presence and actually thought directly at him. Her thoughts came in structured scientific language. Fascinating telepathic interface. The energy signature suggests quantum entanglement principles. I wonder if the range limitation follows an inverse square law, or if consciousness operates outside normal spatial restrictions. While she pondered the scientific implications of their mental contact, Dr. Wells was also remembering her childhood dog, calculating the tip for her last restaurant meal, and trying to recall the lyrics to what her mind labeled as that annoying song from the radio. Yinth had never encountered anything like it. The sheer processing power required to maintain multiple simultaneous thought streams should have overwhelmed any biological brain. Yet Dr. Wells seemed completely comfortable with this mental multitasking. He attempted to follow one thought stream to its conclusion, but discovered that human minds did not think in straight lines. Every concept connected to dozens of others through what appeared to be a vast network of associations. When Dr. Wells thought about quantum mechanics, her mind immediately linked it to her graduate school professor, which reminded her of a particular coffee shop, which triggered memories of meeting her spouse, which led to concerns about their anniversary dinner, which circled back to quantum entanglement as a metaphor for relationships. The evaluation protocols had no framework for this type of cognitive architecture. Yinth's training covered linear thinkers, emotional processors, collective consciousness species, and even hive minds. But humans seemed to combine all these approaches while adding layers of complexity that defied classification. Dr. Wells was now actively trying to communicate with him telepathically. Despite having no natural telepathic abilities, she was attempting to organize her thoughts into what she assumed would be a more accessible format. But this only created additional mental activity, as she simultaneously thought about thinking about thinking. Yinth realized he was experiencing something unprecedented in Mindari evaluation history. This was not simply a more complex version of familiar patterns. Human consciousness operated on principles that his species had never encountered. He carefully withdrew from Dr. Wells's mind and made detailed notes in his assessment log. The standard evaluation forms seemed inadequate. How could he quantify an intelligence that appeared to function as multiple linked processors rather than a single cognitive unit? The preliminary assessment of Subject 1 had taken 3 times longer than normal, and Yinth had barely scratched the surface of her mental capabilities. 11 more humans waited for evaluation, and if they all demonstrated similar cognitive complexity, this assessment could take weeks rather than hours. Yinth looked at his remaining subjects and felt the first stirrings of what humans might call apprehension. Dr. Wells represented their scientific community, which suggested some degree of mental organization and training. What would the minds of their artists, laborers, and entertainers reveal? He checked the chronometer and calculated the time remaining in his scheduled evaluation period. If every human required this level of detailed analysis, he would need to request an extension. The council would not be pleased with delays, but accuracy was paramount in these assessments. Yinth activated the second containment field and prepared to meet Riverstone, poet. Perhaps an artist's mind would prove more straightforward than a scientist's. After all, how complex could creative thinking really be? He would soon discover that human creativity made quantum physics look simple by comparison. Riverstone sat cross-legged in the containment field, eyes closed, apparently meditating. Yinth had reviewed their file 3 times, trying to understand the concept of poet in human society. The closest equivalent in galactic civilization would be a memory keeper or cultural historian, but those roles required strict adherence to factual accuracy. Poetry seemed to involve deliberately altering reality through language. Yinth initiated contact with River's mind and immediately regretted his assumption that artistic thinking would be simpler than scientific reasoning, where Dr. Wells had maintained multiple logical thought streams. River's consciousness resembled an explosion of interconnected imagery, emotion, and linguistic construction. Every concept existed in layers of meaning, each word carrying dozens of associations that branched into infinite possibilities. River was not simply thinking about the telepathic contact. They were experiencing it as a symphony of sensation, translating the mental touch into metaphors involving ocean waves, stellar winds, and the whisper of leaves in forests they had never seen. Simultaneously, they were composing verses about the experience in real time, crafting language that captured not just the facts but the emotional texture of first telepathic contact. Like silver threads through cosmic soup, River thought. Consciousness touches consciousness, and the universe shivers with recognition. Yinth found himself momentarily lost in the poetic imagery before remembering his professional duties. He attempted to probe deeper, seeking measurable cognitive functions, but River's mind refused to cooperate with standard evaluation techniques. When Yinth tried to assess logical reasoning, River processed the test through metaphorical frameworks that somehow produced correct answers through completely non-linear pathways. Asked to solve a spatial puzzle, they reimagined it as a dance between geometric spirits and found the solution through rhythmic patterns rather than mathematical analysis. Even more disturbing was how River's thoughts seemed to infect Yinth's own mental processes. The normally precise Mindari found himself thinking in unusual patterns, seeing connections between concepts that logic suggested should remain separate. River's consciousness appeared to be naturally telepathic in ways that transcended species barriers. "You think in straight lines," River observed, their thoughts gentle but piercing, like a river that forgot it could carve new channels through stone. Yinth attempted to retreat to a safer mental distance, but River's mind had already begun integrating their telepathic exchange into an evolving creative work. They were simultaneously experiencing the evaluation, analyzing its cultural implications, and transforming it into art that somehow captured truths about consciousness that Yinth's scientific instruments could not measure. River was thinking about language as a bridge between minds, about how words could carry not just information, but entire emotional ecosystems. They pondered whether telepathy was simply another form of poetry, a direct sharing of metaphors that bypassed the limitations of speech. The evaluation protocols demanded specific measurements: memory capacity, processing speed, problem-solving efficiency, but River's mind seemed to operate outside these categories entirely. They solved problems by dissolving them, remembered things that had never happened but felt true, and processed information through channels that combined logic, emotion, intuition, and something else that Yinth could not identify. "We are all stories telling ourselves to sleep," River thought, "and sometimes we dream so vividly that we forget we are the dreamers." Yinth realized he was experiencing philosophical concepts that challenged his fundamental understanding of consciousness. River was not just thinking thoughts. They were crafting reality through the act of perception, creating meaning from randomness in ways that seemed almost magical. The poet's mind contained entire universes of possibility, scenarios that existed in potential rather than actuality but felt equally real. River could imagine themselves as different people, experience alternative histories, and empathize so completely with others that the boundaries of individual identity became fluid. Yinth tried to measure River's intelligence using standard metrics but found the tools inadequate. How could he quantify creativity that generated infinite solutions to problems that had not yet been posed? What numerical value could capture imagination that could literally reshape reality through the power of perspective? River sensed his confusion and offered what they considered helpful clarification. Intelligence is not a river with fixed banks, friend from beyond the stars. It is the ocean itself, vast and deep and ever-changing. Some dive for pearls, others surf the waves, and others still learn to become one with the current. The telepathic contact was lasting far longer than any previous evaluation, and Yinth realized he was learning as much about consciousness as he was measuring it. River's mind was teaching him that there were forms of intelligence that could not be captured in reports or reduced to statistical analysis. Worse, River seemed to be enjoying the mental connection in ways that made Yinth uncomfortable. The poet was not just submitting to evaluation, they were actively engaging with his consciousness, asking questions about Mindari culture and perception that forced Yinth to examine his own assumptions about reality. "Do you dream?" River asked. "Do you create beauty for its own sake? Do you love things that serve no practical purpose? Do you ever wonder if the universe is conscious and we are its way of thinking about itself?" These questions fell outside the scope of standard evaluation protocols, but Yinth found himself considering them anyway. River's curiosity was infectious, their wonder at existence itself, transforming the clinical assessment into something resembling a philosophical conversation between equals. By the time Yinth withdrew from River's mind, he felt fundamentally changed by the experience. The poet had somehow managed to evaluate him while being evaluated, offering insights into consciousness that his training had never addressed. Yinth stared at his assessment forms, unable to find appropriate categories for what he had experienced. Riverstone possessed intelligence that operated through channels his species had never encountered. They could solve problems by reimagining them, find truth through fiction, and create meaning from chaos in ways that suggested human consciousness was far more sophisticated than preliminary scans had indicated. The third subject, Bob Turner, waited patiently in his containment field. According to his file, he was a farmer, someone who grew food for survival. After the complexity of the physicist and poet, Yinth hoped that agricultural thinking might prove more straightforward. He was about to discover that humans who worked with living systems possessed forms of intelligence that made both science and art look simple by comparison. As Yinth prepared for the third evaluation, he realized that his understanding of intelligence itself was being fundamentally challenged. These humans were not just more complex than other species. They were operating on cognitive principles that his civilization had never encountered. The standard evaluation was becoming something else entirely, and Yinth was beginning to suspect that humanity might evaluate the evaluators rather than the other way around. Bob Turner's weathered hands rested calmly on his knees as he waited for the evaluation to begin. His file described him as a third-generation farmer from what humans called the American Midwest, specializing in sustainable agriculture and crop rotation. Yinth approached this assessment with desperate hope that agricultural thinking might finally provide the straightforward cognitive patterns he was trained to evaluate. The moment Yinth's consciousness touched Bob's mind, he realized his hope was misplaced. Bob was not thinking about farming. He was thinking with farming. His consciousness operated like a living ecosystem, with thoughts growing, cross-pollinating, and cycling through seasons of development in patterns that mimic the agricultural systems he managed. Every observation Bob made about his current situation connected to vast networks of experiential knowledge. He noticed the artificial gravity in the testing chamber and immediately began calculating how different gravitational fields might affect plant growth. The strange blue lighting reminded him of spectrum considerations for greenhouse operations, which led to thoughts about energy efficiency, which connected to soil microorganism health, which circled back to his grandfather's advice about reading weather patterns. Bob was simultaneously monitoring dozens of variables that affected his farm's well-being. Even confined in an alien testing facility, his mind tracked seasonal progressions on Earth, maintained awareness of weather patterns across 3 counties, and processed the interconnected relationships between soil chemistry, plant genetics, market prices, and climate trends. What appeared to be simple agricultural knowledge revealed itself as systems thinking of extraordinary complexity. Bob understood how every component of his environment affected every other component across multiple timescales. He could trace the consequences of planting decisions through entire crop cycles, predict how current soil management would impact yields 5 years in the future, and optimize resource allocation across variables that most species would consider unrelated. Interesting soil composition in this facility, Bob thought, somehow detecting mineral content through the artificial atmosphere. Low organic matter sterile profile would need significant amendment for viable agriculture, though the controlled environment could support hydroponic operations with proper nutrient cycling. Yinth watched in amazement as Bob's mind automatically began designing agricultural solutions for the space station. The farmer was simultaneously analyzing the facility's structural integrity for weight-bearing capacity, calculating water recycling requirements, and evaluating how artificial gravity might affect root development. Bob was thinking about time in ways that challenged Yinth's understanding of consciousness. Where most species focused on immediate present or near future, Bob's awareness encompassed decades-long cycles. He was making decisions based on how they would affect soil health for his grandchildren's generation, while simultaneously responding to immediate weather conditions that might change within hours. The farmer's mind contained detailed models of complex systems that rivaled the most sophisticated computer simulations. Bob could predict how changing one variable would cascade through entire agricultural ecosystems, but he processed these calculations through intuitive understanding rather than mathematical analysis. Weather's changing back home, Bob observed, though he had no apparent way to access current meteorological data. Storm front moving through Ohio. Good for the winter wheat. But Jim Patterson should bring his cattle in tonight. Yinth realized that Bob somehow maintained awareness of conditions on Earth despite being in orbit. The farmer's consciousness appeared to be connected to his land in ways that transcended physical presence. When Yinth attempted to assess Bob's problem-solving abilities, He discovered thinking patterns that operated on principles of patient observation, adaptive response, and long-term optimization. Bob solved problems by understanding them as part of larger systems, rather than isolated challenges. He could find solutions that improved multiple variables simultaneously, often by working with natural processes, rather than against them. The evaluation became even more complex when Yinth activated the fourth containment field and began assessing Luna Rodriguez, the video game designer. If Bob's mind resembled a living ecosystem, Luna's consciousness operated like a parallel processing supercomputer. Luna was simultaneously running multiple creative projects in her head while analyzing the testing facility's design principles. She was debugging code for a game about interstellar agriculture, inspired by observing Bob through the transparent barriers, composing background music for a puzzle game, balancing character statistics for a role-playing adventure, and designing user interface elements for a space exploration simulator. Her mind contained entire virtual worlds in various stages of development. Each game represented complex systems of rules, interactions, and player psychology that she maintained and modified in real time. Luna could simulation test thousands of possible gameplay scenarios while simultaneously creating the artistic assets and programming logic needed to implement them. This whole situation would make an amazing game concept, Luna thought while experiencing the telepathic evaluation. Multiple alien species, consciousness mechanics, reality shifting through mental contact. Player starts as the evaluator but gradually realizes the test subjects are evaluating them. Meta-narrative about intelligence assessment. Could use telepathic interface as core gameplay mechanic. Yinth found himself caught up in Luna's creative vision, watching as she developed an entire interactive entertainment concept based on their current situation. She was treating the evaluation as both a personal experience and raw material for artistic creation, transforming reality into possibility with stunning speed and complexity. Luna's consciousness operated on multiple levels simultaneously. She was experiencing the present moment while designing fictional worlds, solving technical programming challenges while composing music, and analyzing human psychology while creating mathematical models for balanced gameplay. Her mind contained libraries of creative solutions, techniques for generating endless variations on basic themes, an intuitive understanding of how small changes could create dramatically different user experiences. Luna could design systems that felt natural and intuitive, while being built on layers of hidden complexity. The evaluation of Dorothy Kim, the grandmother, introduced yet another dimension of cognitive complexity that left Yinth struggling to maintain professional composure. Dorothy's mind resembled a vast library with a librarian, who had perfect recall and unlimited time to make connections between seemingly unrelated information. Every current experience triggered cascading associations through decades of accumulated knowledge. Dorothy was not just remembering her past. She was actively integrating new information into frameworks built from a lifetime of learning, relationship management, and pattern recognition. She was simultaneously worried about her grandson's upcoming college entrance exams, analyzing the similarities between Yinth's communication style and her late husband's approach to problem-solving, mentally organizing recipes that might work with the dietary restrictions of 3 different family members, and composing a letter to her representative about healthcare policy. Dorothy's consciousness contained detailed models of dozens of individual personalities. She could predict how different family members would react to various situations, mediate conflicts by understanding multiple perspectives simultaneously, and maintain awareness of complex social dynamics across several generations. "You're working very hard, dear," Dorothy thought at Yinth, her mental voice carrying the same gentle authority she used with her grandchildren. "This evaluation process is stressing you more than it should. Would you like me to explain how human minds work? I've had plenty of experience with different types of thinking." Yinth realized that Dorothy was offering to help him complete his assessment of humanity. The grandmother had somehow recognized his growing confusion and was prepared to provide guidance based on decades of observing and understanding human cognitive diversity. By the 5th assessment, Yinth's confidence in standard evaluation protocols had completely collapsed. Each human mind revealed new forms of intelligence that challenged his fundamental assumptions about consciousness itself. They were not just more complex than other species. They were operating on principles that his training had never addressed. Pierre Dubois, the chef, introduced sensory processing capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. Sam Johnson, the mechanic, demonstrated three-dimensional thinking that could visualize and manipulate complex systems in real time. Each evaluation revealed new depths of human cognitive capability. Yinth checked his chronometer and realized the day had passed without completing a single standard assessment form. The humans were not failing his tests. They were making the tests themselves seem inadequate and primitive. For the first time in his professional career, Yinth began to question whether his species truly understood intelligence at all. Pierre Dubois hummed softly while examining the energy field that contained him, his trained eye analyzing the subtle color variations in the barrier. Yinth had postponed this evaluation twice, hoping to regain some professional composure after the previous assessments. Now, facing the human chef, he wondered if his telepathic abilities might be suffering from some form of overload. The moment Yinth connected with Pierre's consciousness, his own senses exploded with information he had never experienced before. Pierre was not just thinking about food. He was experiencing reality through layers of sensory integration that transformed every perception into complex flavor profiles, texture combinations, and aromatic symphonies. The artificial atmosphere of the space station tasted like sterile metal, with undertones of recycled air, while the energy barriers carried what Pierre mentally described as blue cheese, sharpness with hints of electrical storm. Yinth had never realized that consciousness could process information through such interconnected sensory channels. Pierre's mind automatically translated visual input into taste combinations, converted emotional states into seasoning preferences, and linked every memory to detailed flavor profiles that could trigger complete sensory experiences. "The stress in your mental contact," Pierre observed, "tastes like overcooked garlic with too much salt. You need to reduce the heat and add something sweet to balance the bitter notes." The chef was simultaneously analyzing Yinth's telepathic technique through culinary metaphors while planning a menu that could accommodate the dietary requirements of multiple alien species. Pierre's consciousness contained detailed knowledge of how thousands of ingredients interacted across every possible combination, how cooking methods affected nutritional and flavor development, and how cultural food preferences reflected deeper psychological patterns. Pierre was thinking in chemical equations disguised as recipes, understanding molecular interactions through intuitive knowledge that rivaled advanced scientific analysis. He could predict how proteins would denature under specific heat conditions, how acid balance would affect fermentation processes, and how presentation techniques would influence psychological satisfaction. Food is just applied chemistry with artistic expression, Pierre thought while mentally designing a dish that would represent the telepathic evaluation experience. Consciousness touching consciousness like wine pairing with cheese, each element enhancing the other while maintaining individual character. Yinth found himself hungry for the first time during an evaluation, his consciousness somehow infected with Pierre's sensory memories of perfectly prepared meals. The chef's mind contained centuries of cumulative human culinary knowledge, but processed through personal experience that transformed facts into living understanding. Pierre was using cooking metaphors to analyze the telepathic contact itself, treating Yinth's mental probes like ingredients that needed proper preparation to achieve optimal results. The chef was actually improving the evaluation experience by unconsciously optimizing the telepathic interface through principles he had learned from kitchen management. When Yinth reluctantly moved to Sam Johnson, the mechanic, he encountered a form of spatial intelligence that challenged his understanding of how consciousness could manipulate abstract concepts. Sam's mind operated like a three-dimensional modeling system that could disassemble, analyze, and reconstruct complex machinery through pure thought. He was simultaneously diagnosing 17 different mechanical problems across the testing facility, optimizing the energy distribution systems, and designing improvements for the containment field generators. "This whole setup is over-engineered," Sam thought while examining the telepathic amplification equipment. "Could reduce power consumption by 30% with better component placement and eliminate those resonance problems in the secondary circuits." Sam was thinking in mechanical relationships that existed in space and time simultaneously. He could trace power flows through systems he had never seen before, understand stress distribution in structural components through visual inspection, and predict failure points by analyzing wear patterns that most species would require specialized instruments to detect. The mechanics, consciousness contained intuitive understanding of physics principles that he had never formally studied. Sam knew how forces interacted, how materials responded to stress, and how systems could be optimized for efficiency through hands-on experience that had taught him to think in terms of physical relationships. Sam was not just solving mechanical problems, he was understanding them. Every repair task connected to broader principles of engineering, materials science, and system optimization that he processed through practical knowledge rather than theoretical analysis. Your telepathic equipment has a feedback loop building in the tertiary amplifier, Sam observed. Metal fatigue in the resonance chamber. Should replace that component before it cascades into system failure. Yinth checked his instruments and discovered that Sam was correct. The mechanic had diagnosed equipment problems that Yinth's own monitoring systems had not yet detected. When Yinth attempted to evaluate Rachel Green, the teacher, he encountered cognitive abilities that seemed designed to understand and optimize consciousness itself. Rachel's mind operated like an adaptive educational system that could simultaneously model dozens of different learning styles, personality types, and knowledge levels. She was analyzing Yinth's assessment techniques through pedagogical frameworks, identifying ways to improve the evaluation process for both parties. You're approaching this like a standardized test, Rachel thought, her mental voice carrying gentle correction. But consciousness isn't standardized. Each mind learns and expresses intelligence differently. Your evaluation methods are missing most of what makes these individuals remarkable. Rachel was simultaneously developing lesson plans for teaching telepathic communication to humans, analyzing how different personality types might respond to first contact situations, and designing educational frameworks that could help bridge the communication gap between species. Her consciousness contained detailed models of human psychological development, learning theory, and social dynamics that she applied in real time to optimize every interaction. Rachel could read emotional states, predict learning obstacles, and adapt her communication style to match the needs of her audience. Intelligence is not a single trait, Rachel explained while helping Yinth understand his own evaluation process. It's a constellation of abilities that work together differently in each individual. You're trying to measure the brightness of stars using tools designed for measuring the distance between planets. Yinth realized that Rachel was essentially teaching him how to conduct better evaluations while being evaluated herself. The teacher was using the assessment as an opportunity to improve the assessment, treating the experience as a collaborative learning opportunity rather than a competitive test. By the time Yinth approached Kai Tanaka, the musician, his confidence in his own professional competence had completely collapsed. Kai's mind operated through pattern recognition systems that could simultaneously process rhythm, harmony, melody, and emotional resonance across multiple sensory channels. Kai was not just thinking about music, he was thinking musically. Every aspect of the evaluation experience was automatically translated into rhythmic patterns, harmonic progressions, and melodic structures that somehow captured meaning that language could not express. Your telepathic contact has a syncopated rhythm with unresolved harmonic tension, Kai observed. Like a jazz piece where the musicians are playing in different time signatures but trying to find the groove. Together, Kai's consciousness contained understanding of how sound waves interacted with emotional states, how mathematical relationships could be expressed through musical intervals, and how abstract concepts could be communicated through arrangements of organized sound that bypassed rational thought entirely. The musician was simultaneously composing 3 different pieces inspired by the telepathic evaluation, analyzing the rhythmic patterns in Yinth's thought processes, and developing musical frameworks that could facilitate communication between species with different sensory capabilities. When Yinth finally reached Tyler Brooks, the programmer, he encountered a mind that operated like a sophisticated, debugging system capable of analyzing and optimizing reality itself. Tyler was simultaneously running multiple mental programs that analyzed the logical structure of the evaluation process, identified inefficiencies in the telepathic communication protocols, and developed algorithmic solutions for problems that had not yet been clearly defined. Your assessment software has serious logical flaws, Tyler thought while reverse engineering Yinth's evaluation methods. You're trying to use binary classification systems to analyze analog consciousness. It's like trying to run advanced graphics on a calculator. Tyler's mind contained intuitive understanding of information systems, logical structures, and process optimization that he applied to every aspect of reality. He could debug conversations, optimize social interactions, and design solutions for problems by treating them as programming challenges. Consciousness is just very sophisticated software running on biological hardware, Tyler explained while helping Yinth understand human cognitive architecture. But you're trying to analyze the software by examining the hardware. You need to understand the code, not just measure the processor speed. Maria Santos, the nurse, demonstrated emotional intelligence systems that operated parallel to logical reasoning while processing human context that transformed raw data into wisdom. Alex Chen, the comedian, nearly caused Yinth to disconnect entirely when recursive humor loops created infinite feedback patterns that challenged the fundamental structure of linear thought. By the end of the day, Yinth was experiencing what humans would recognize as a nervous breakdown. Every assessment had revealed new forms of intelligence that made his evaluation protocols seem primitive and inadequate. The humans had not just passed his tests, they had accidentally broken the tests so thoroughly that Yinth questioned everything he thought he knew about consciousness itself. Maria Santos noticed Yinth's distress before he did. Through the containment barrier, her trained eye caught the subtle tremor in his elongated fingers and the way his pale blue skin had shifted to a greenish hue that suggested physiological stress. When he initiated telepathic contact, her mind immediately began analyzing his condition, with the systematic compassion that had made her an exceptional nurse. "You're experiencing cognitive overload," Maria observed, her thoughts carrying the gentle authority of someone accustomed to treating patients in crisis. "Your neural pathways are showing signs of fatigue. When did you last rest properly?" Yinth found himself on the receiving end of medical assessment for the first time in his career. Maria's consciousness operated like a sophisticated diagnostic system that could simultaneously monitor emotional states, physical symptoms, and psychological well-being, while providing exactly the type of support needed in each moment. Maria was not just thinking about healthcare, she was practicing it through telepathic contact. Her mind automatically cataloged Yinth's stress indicators, analyzed the probable causes of his cognitive strain, and began developing treatment protocols that addressed both immediate symptoms and underlying problems. "You've been trying to force human consciousness into frameworks that weren't designed to contain it," Maria explained while mentally adjusting her communication style to reduce his telepathic fatigue. "It's like trying to perform surgery with tools made for mechanical repair. The equipment isn't wrong, but it's not appropriate for this type of work." Maria's consciousness contained deep understanding of how different individuals responded to stress, illness, and recovery. She could read subtle cues that indicated pain, fear, hope, or determination, and adapt her approach to provide exactly the type of care that would be most effective for each person's unique needs. She was simultaneously worried about her patients back on Earth, analyzing how the telepathic evaluation might affect Yinth's long-term psychological health, and developing protocols for helping other evaluators avoid the cognitive strain that was clearly affecting him. Healthcare isn't about applying standard procedures, Maria thought while helping Yinth process his confusion about human intelligence. It's about understanding that every individual is unique and finding ways to help them achieve their best possible outcome within their specific circumstances. Maria was practicing medicine on concepts themselves, treating Yinth's flawed evaluation methods like symptoms of a larger problem that could be healed through better understanding rather than more intensive analysis. When Yinth reluctantly moved to the final evaluation, he felt like a patient himself rather than a professional evaluator. Alex Chen, the comedian, represented his last hope of finding at least one human mind that operated within familiar parameters. This hope died the moment Alex's consciousness exploded with recursive humor loops that created infinite feedback patterns in Yinth's telepathic connection. Alex was not just thinking funny thoughts. He was thinking about thinking funny thoughts about thinking funny thoughts in patterns that created self-referential comedy that existed in dimensions Yinth had never imagined possible. A telepathic alien walks into a consciousness evaluation, Alex began, somehow turning their current situation into a joke setup that existed within the telepathic contact itself. He says to the human, "I'm here to test your intelligence." The human says, "How do you know you're qualified to judge intelligence if you've never encountered intelligence like ours?" The alien says, "That's not how evaluation works." The human says, "Exactly." Alex was simultaneously creating comedy about their situation while analyzing the social and philosophical implications of first contact through humor that revealed deeper truths than serious analysis. His mind contained understanding of irony, timing, social expectations, and psychological patterns that he combined into observations that were both hilarious and profound. The funny thing about intelligence tests, Alex continued while creating meta-commentary about the evaluation process, is that they tell you more about the limitations of the testers than the capabilities of the tested. It's like judging fish by their ability to climb trees and then wondering why all the fish seem stupid. Alex's consciousness operated through pattern recognition systems that could find humor in any situation by identifying unexpected connections, social absurdities, and logical inconsistencies that most minds would miss entirely. He was treating the entire telepathic evaluation as raw material for comedy, while simultaneously using humor to communicate insights about consciousness, communication, and cultural differences that challenged Yinth's fundamental assumptions about reality. You know what's really funny? Alex thought while creating jokes about telepathic communication. You're trying to understand human intelligence using the same approaches that would work for species with simple, linear consciousness. It's like trying to understand jazz by analyzing sheet music for children's songs. You're not just missing the point, you're missing the existence of the point entirely. Alex was creating recursive jokes about the process of creating recursive jokes while analyzing the philosophical implications of humor as a form of intelligence that transcended logical analysis. Yinth realized that Alex was not just entertaining himself during the evaluation. The comedian was using humor to reveal fundamental truths about consciousness, communication, and intelligence that serious analysis had failed to capture. By the time Yinth completed all 12 evaluations, his understanding of intelligence itself had been completely reconstructed. Each human had demonstrated cognitive capabilities that operated on principles his training had never addressed. They were not just more complex than other species, they represented entirely different approaches to consciousness that challenged the basic assumptions underlying galactic civilization. Dr. Wells had shown him that scientific thinking could operate through multiple parallel processes that combined logic, intuition, and creativity in ways that produced insights impossible through any single approach. River had demonstrated that artistic consciousness could reshape reality through the power of perception and language, creating meaning from chaos in ways that transcended rational analysis. Bob had revealed that practical intelligence could understand complex systems through experiential knowledge that operated across multiple timescales simultaneously. Luna had shown him that creative consciousness could maintain multiple virtual realities while optimizing systems for human engagement and satisfaction. Dorothy had demonstrated that accumulated wisdom could process new information through frameworks built from decades of relationship management and pattern recognition. Pierre had revealed that sensory intelligence could integrate information across multiple channels to create understanding that transcended individual sense data. Sam had shown him that mechanical intelligence could understand physical systems through spatial reasoning that operated like three-dimensional modeling in real time. Rachel had demonstrated that educational intelligence could optimize consciousness itself by understanding how different minds learned and expressed their capabilities. Kai had revealed that musical intelligence could process abstract relationships through pattern recognition systems that captured meaning beyond language. Tyler had shown him that programming intelligence could debug reality itself by analyzing logical structures and optimizing processes for efficiency. Maria had demonstrated that caring intelligence could diagnose and treat problems through systematic compassion that addressed both symptoms and underlying causes. Alex had revealed that comedic intelligence could find truth through humor by identifying unexpected connections and social absurdities that serious analysis missed entirely. Yinth sat in his evaluation chamber, surrounded by assessment forms that seemed pitifully inadequate for capturing what he had experienced. The standard metrics meant nothing when applied to consciousness that operated on principles his species had never encountered. The humans had not failed his tests. They had revealed that his tests were fundamentally flawed instruments for measuring intelligence that transcended the categories he was trained to recognize. For the first time in his professional career, Yinth understood that he was not qualified to evaluate the species he had been sent to assess. The humans had accidentally evaluated him instead, revealing the limitations of his own cognitive frameworks and the inadequacy of galactic civilization's understanding of consciousness itself. The most disturbing realization was that the humans had done this completely unintentionally. They were not trying to demonstrate superior intelligence. They were simply being themselves, thinking naturally, and revealing cognitive capabilities that made standard evaluation procedures look primitive by comparison. Yinth faced a choice between filing a standard report that would misrepresent everything he had learned or writing an honest assessment that would challenge the fundamental assumptions underlying galactic civilization's approach to intelligence evaluation. The decision would determine not just humanity's fate, but the future of how consciousness itself was understood throughout the galaxy. Yinth stared at the blank assessment report for 3 hours before attempting to write a single word. His hands trembled slightly as he activated the dictation interface, knowing that whatever he filed would either become the most important document in galactic evaluation history or the end of his career. The standard form demanded simple classifications: cognitive capacity, emotional stability, logical reasoning, cultural development, technological aptitude, and overall recommendation. Each category expected numerical ratings and brief explanations that would determine humanity's status in galactic civilization. Yinth had never realized how inadequate these categories were until he tried to fit human consciousness into their rigid boundaries. Assessment. Report 848 Prime, he began, his voice carrying exhaustion that 2 centuries of evaluations had never produced. Species designation: Homo sapiens, Sol system, 3rd planet. Evaluator: Proctor Yinth, Senior Telepathic Assessor, Mindari Evaluation Consortium. He paused, knowing that his next words would either be dismissed as the ravings of an evaluator who had suffered some form of breakdown or recognized as evidence that galactic civilization had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of intelligence itself. Standard evaluation protocols prove inadequate for assessment of human consciousness. Recommend immediate revision of all intelligence measurement systems before proceeding with additional evaluations of this species. Yinth deleted the opening and started again, trying to find language that would convey the magnitude of what he had encountered without sounding like he had lost his professional objectivity. Cognitive capacity. Beyond standard measurement parameters. Human consciousness operates through parallel processing systems that maintain multiple thought streams simultaneously. Individual subjects demonstrate computational abilities that exceed galactic norms while operating through biological neural networks that should not be capable of such complexity. He stopped typing and rubbed his elongated head, feeling the onset of a headache that stemmed from trying to compress infinite complexity into finite categories. Emotional stability. Classification. Impossible using current criteria. Humans demonstrate emotional intelligence that operates parallel to logical reasoning, processing contextual information that transforms data into wisdom. Emotional responses enhance rather than impair cognitive function through mechanisms that current science cannot explain. Yinth realized he was describing capabilities that his own species lacked, rather than deficiencies that required correction. Logical reasoning transcends linear analysis. Humans employ reasoning systems that combine logic, intuition, creativity, and experience in ways that produce solutions impossible through any single approach. Problem-solving methods appear chaotic, but consistently generate optimal results through adaptive frameworks that self-modify in real time. The report was becoming a confession that the evaluators were less sophisticated than the species they were supposed to assess. Cultural development. advanced beyond galactic norms. Human culture demonstrates appreciation for diversity of thought, encouragement of individual creativity, and integration of multiple perspectives that produces collective intelligence greater than the sum of individual capabilities. Social systems optimize for innovation rather than conformity. Yinth paused to review what he had written, realizing that he was essentially arguing that humanity was too advanced for galactic civilization rather than too primitive. Technological aptitude demonstrates understanding of principles underlying technology, rather than mere ability to use existing systems. Humans show capability for intuitive engineering, creative problem-solving, and adaptive optimization that suggests potential for technological development that exceeds current galactic standards. He was no longer filing an evaluation report. He was writing a recommendation that the galaxy should learn from humanity rather than the other way around. Overall assessment. Homo sapiens demonstrates cognitive capabilities that operate on principles not addressed by current evaluation frameworks. Standard classification systems are inadequate for measuring intelligence that combines multiple processing modes, adaptive reasoning, and creative problem-solving through biological neural networks that function as organic quantum computers. Yinth stopped typing and activated the emergency communication protocol that would connect him directly to the Galactic Council's Evaluation Oversight Committee. This is Proctor Yinth requesting immediate consultation regarding Assessment 848 Prime. Need to speak with the committee. Before filing my final report, the response came within minutes. The Council's senior administrator appearing as a holographic projection in his evaluation chamber. Proctor Yinth, your preliminary reports have been flagged as potentially anomalous. Are you experiencing any health issues that might affect your evaluation capabilities? Administrator, I need to request emergency revision of our entire intelligence assessment system. The humans we were sent to evaluate have demonstrated cognitive capabilities that make our current frameworks look primitive. The administrator's expression shifted from concern to skepticism. Proctor, you have conducted 847 successful evaluations without incident. Perhaps the stress of extended telepathic contact has affected your judgment. Administrator, I formally request immediate hazard pay classification for this assignment and emergency psychological support for evaluation trauma. I also recommend that no telepathic species attempt direct mental contact with humans without extensive preparation and protective protocols. The silence that followed was longer than Yinth had expected. Proctor, please file your complete assessment using standard procedures. The committee will review your recommendations, but we cannot authorize protocol changes based on a single evaluation. Yinth returned to his report, knowing that he had to find a way to communicate the truth about human intelligence while using language that would not result in his immediate dismissal. Formal recommendation: immediate admission to Galactic Council with full membership status. Humans demonstrate intelligence that exceeds measurement capabilities of current assessment systems. Species shows potential for contributions to galactic civilization that could advance collective knowledge and problem-solving capabilities. He added a personal note that he knew would become part of official records. Personal addendum. This evaluation has revealed fundamental limitations in our understanding of consciousness itself. Humans do not simply possess different forms of intelligence. They demonstrate that intelligence operates on principles we have never encountered. They solve problems by dissolving them, find truth through fiction, create meaning from chaos, and maintain multiple reality frameworks simultaneously while remaining functionally effective in practical situations. I formally request hazard pay, mandatory vacation time, and psychological counseling to process the cognitive disruption caused by extended contact with human consciousness. I also recommend that future human assessments be conducted by non-telepathic species or through indirect methods only, as direct mental contact with human minds poses risks to evaluator psychological well-being. The humans did not fail our tests. They accidentally broke our tests so thoroughly that I question whether our civilization understands intelligence at all. They are not more advanced than us in the ways we expected. They are advanced in ways we never imagined possible. Yinth filed the report and immediately submitted a formal request for emergency leave. As he powered down the evaluation equipment, He realized that humanity would be fast-tracked into galactic civilization, not because they had passed the assessment, but because they had revealed that the assessment itself was fundamentally flawed. 6 months later, the Galactic Council's intelligence evaluation system underwent complete revision. Humanity became the first species to join the Council, based on an evaluator's recommendation that they were too sophisticated to be properly evaluated. Yinth never conducted another telepathic assessment. He became a researcher studying consciousness theory, spending the rest of his career trying to understand how biological neural networks could produce the cognitive complexity he had encountered in human minds. The humans, meanwhile, began contributing to galactic civilization in ways that exceeded every prediction. They solved problems that had puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for centuries, created art that transcended species barriers, and developed technologies that combined multiple scientific disciplines in ways that had never been attempted. Most importantly, they began teaching other species that intelligence was not a single trait to be measured, but a constellation of capabilities that could be developed, combined, and shared in ways that made the entire galaxy more capable than any individual species could be alone. The evaluation of humanity had ended with the evaluators being evaluated instead, and both species were better for the experience.